Okay, one of the fun things about trying these different quick scene format cards is just seeing exactly what we can do in our given span of time. Okay, I'm going to try a technique that I really enjoy doing, but I'm just not quite sure if I can do it in the span of 10 to 15 minutes, so we'll see here. Alright, so I'm just going on with some tumbled glass distress ink. Any kind of light blue, if you're following this scene, will do. And in the spirit of kind of a quicker scene, I find it just easier to use a re-inker because you can really get a lot of coverage and your applicator really gets saturated with ink, whatever type of application tool you are using. Just that liquid ink kind of all throughout your applicator will give you a really nice thick application and pretty saturated too as far as the amount of coverage and ink that will hold. Okay, so just adding on the next color, which is a salvia blue. It's just going on with another layer of light blue. Okay. Doesn't matter really, the brand or whatnot. It just, the type of ink and that we're using here is dye-based. Okay, at least in terms of this process. You can go with other types of backgrounds as well. But just kind of get something going down there, and you can see I'm kind of retaining some of the lighter areas just for a little bit of variation. I'm not just trying to color this whole card in, otherwise we can just start off with a, something like a light blue, foundation. Okay, but we want to go for a little bit of variation so that we have some kind of visual variety going on in the background, which can potentially lend itself to a nice, rich surface that's, as kind of void of monotony as we can get. Okay, so you can see where I've just kind of streaked it in there. See those little streaks in there? The way that you do that is just you retain it. You don't go over the whole thing. So I'm doing a lot of just kind of streaking across like that, and where you do it and how many of those kind of light areas you keep, it's all up to you. I didn't have a set number in mind. I just kind of let what happened happen somewhat. I don't know. Could be on a subconscious level, but I don't think so. Okay, so let's go on with some of these trees here. Alright, now I want these trees a little bit darker, so I am going to do something. I'm going to hit it with a black pad. Okay, it's dye-based ink again. Now let's see if I can get some variation in it. I have these dye-based markers. Okay. So I hit it with the black, so I have some inherent kind of darker values to work with. Okay, now I'm going across some of these bows, these the branches with some of that dark green. Sometimes I stamp this out and it's all black, and this was all, I don't know, maybe for naught, but sometimes I get some good variation. Now I'll be going for several impressions of this, so we'll see how that goes. Okay, now I'm going to do something that I do in a lot of my pieces. I'm going to taper this, okay? So it's going from wet to dry down here. So I'm kind of taking off some of this ink off the bottom, and a lot of the bottom, and as I move up, I'm taking off a little bit less. I've done this in other videos too. Okay, now I have a lot of ink in that background too, so gonna have to hold it on. So see, it's a little bit of value variation and hue variation, and there's a little bit of brown and green throughout that. Okay, let's go for I'll be doing several different impressions with pine trees to fill that fill it in. Okay. Okay, maybe this one right here, I'll just hit it with some green, this darker green. This is the dual pine from nature set number 1. And the previous one was, I don't know what it was called. I think it was just called pine. I don't think it was called single pine. Okay. Go around right here. We're going to build this up though, remember, so hang in there with me as I get these made, impressions made. Okay, about like that. Kind of doing them at different heights to kind of try to avoid monotony. And you can do them at different values too. Okay, so I hit that one with a lot of green in there. Maybe on this one right here, I'll just use a little bit of green smudged in there. When you do that dark, you know, or light over dark, it tends to blend in very nicely. Okay, now maybe this one I won't wipe off any off the bottom so that I'll get a full impression. Kind of a little bit darker. Okay, so we're creating a little bit of depth through the use of value. Okay, things that are darker generally represent things that are a little bit closer, not always, you know, it depends on the lighting of a given scene, but just in general, if all things were the same and lighting was the same, darker things in the foreground, which mean kind of lower on your horizon as well. And that's kind of the way Western perspective works. Okay. A nice pine forest here. Come up here. Several impressions with this single one so far. I think 2 impressions with this the individual one. Okay. Alright, now I'm going to get a little bit of texture down there. I'm going to hit it with this blue, I think. This blue will kind of merge a little bit with the foundation that was stamped in terms of the color scheme. Go with some lighter impressions as it goes higher up, meaning it's farther back in the distance. Okay, now I'm finding that I feel like this needs a little bit more color and a little bit more range. So let's go with this darker kind of navy blue, all right? You've seen me use the Danube blue from Memento, that's an excellent one. But any of your kind of darker blues would work just fine. Okay, I'm smearing these trees a little bit because that black is pretty wet on there, so I'll just try this dabbing technique instead. Okay. If I get a little bit of texture in, it's not going to really matter because of all the texture that we'll be bringing into it. Okay, let me hit it down here some to go for a little bit of a framing. Okay. Something like this technique would be good with things like pastels as well, if you want to use kind of a pastel method to create this kind of glow. Okay. Let's go with a Prussian blue, one of my favorite blues. It's very, very dark and rich. Okay, hitting it down here. Okay. Use the back side of this piece of paper. Okay. Now let's see if I have a clean applicator here. Okay, now let me get my supplies going for this. Let's see, I'll use this as my mask actually. Okay, now I have a kind of a drier color box pad. I haven't used this one in a while. I've been using my juicier ones, but for this purpose, I think I'll use my dry one. If you're using a wet one, just maybe don't dab into there as much. Okay. Alright, so let's give this a try and let's see how far we can get. Alright, let's have some kind of light coming out there. I haven't done this for a while, so let's see how it goes. Okay, just kind of let's see, I'll make that my focal point right there, so things will kind of emanate from back in around that area, at least. Okay, coming in, this, creating a beam of light. Or trying to. I haven't done this for a while, so I don't know. Maybe cut me some slack. And then I'm doing it kind of in a hurry here too, so well, let's just see how it goes. It's fun. That's all fun stuff, you know. Okay. Kind of make it a little bit more irregular to the way these crepuscular rays can be. See, I can do that one a little bit less if I want to. You can kind of go in and out of trees too. Like I can hit it kind of across this tree right here, but I don't know, I can go in back of that tree, so I won't cover it up right there. Okay, so kind of, you know, vary it a little bit. Vary it or not, I should say. Just kind of go with your gut and eyes too, you know, and see what's working out. You know, that's kind of make it formulaic here. All scenes are going to be a little bit different too. I mean, like this one right here, it just depends how dark I've made the background, you know, maybe how light and opaque and built up these rays, you know, could be, or should be. See that? It's kind of coming through. It's really subtle because I made the scene in the area that those beams are fairly light. Okay. I'll go for one more, like right around in here. I'll make this one fairly subtle. Okay. Go for something like that. It's kind of interesting having those light beams coming through. It's fairly subtle though, again. Right? And maybe for this scene that works out really good, you know, in terms of the kind of the overall scheme of it. Okay, let's put some of these branches behind some of this kind of misty fog just to kind of incorporate some of this texture into the scene in general, okay? I find that kind of works as somewhat of a unifying element Okay, now remember, my pad is really quite dry right now, so I'm putting on just a very, very thin layer. If you have a very wet pad, which most of our pads are of pigment ink, okay, you're just going to barely tap it in there and then really blot it off before you take it on your scene. Otherwise, you're going to be left with like blobs of kind of a white ink everywhere, which is, in this case, probably not the technique, or overall look that we're going after. Alright, so see those kind of beams going through there. And I like the idea of a little bit of extra texture, so I'm going to pause. Well, let me see. Maybe I won't pause. I'm racing the clock here, though. Okay, now I left this lid off, so this paint is really quite hard, and I've been gone for a week, so I need to reconstitute a little bit of this. This is Dr. Martin's bleed-proof white. And you can see it's really hard, so it reconstitutes pretty well, but for some reason for mine, which never happened in the past and recently, I'm talking about the last couple months, for some reason, when I close this up, it gets really mildewy in there. I don't know why that would be. I don't know if something got mixed in with this powder or not, what makes up this paint. Bleed-proof white is a opaque watercolor paint, not ink, okay? But anyways, yeah, it's really moldy, so I just leave mine open, and whenever I need it, I just reconstitute it with some water. Alright, let's see if we can get some extra texture on here. Alright. I'm just going straight. I didn't test it. I usually test it out. Let's see, let me try to zoom in here, maybe you can see what's going on a little bit more. Isn't that fun? It's fun to do. I don't know, it's like embossing or someone, when someone does that, it's like a really cool thing to watch happen right in front of me. I'm getting some big ones and, smaller ones just because I made this paint so thin, okay? So you can get a little bit more variation the thinner it goes. But, alright, let's see what we have here. It's kind of a fun little card, though, isn't it? I mean, it's really simple. It kind of needs like a quote or something like that. If I was going to do that, though, I would have needed to do it before I splatter painted it, because that splatter paint is going to dry dimensionally. So, when you touch it, it's like this raised thing, because it really hits the surface and it dries pretty fast. And it will be a raised surface, but look at that texture in there. So we have some kind of subtle things going on here in terms of the light beams. The light beams could be a little bit more opaque, and if I spent more time going over it again, I can kind of bring this out a little bit more, but it's kind of fun to add those little textures in like that. And if this was not a quick scene, I would have made things a little bit darker on the perimeter, but not too bad for kind of a quick scene with so much texture and kind of variation happening throughout there, just playing around with some very kind of translucent white effects right there. And we gave a little bit of a head start by wiping off some of the bottom, but adding some of that extra in there. Some gel pen work might look kind of interesting for those trees, but this could be like like a first snowfall of the year or something like that, when everything's kind of frosted over. And then you go for that extra texture of the Dr. Martin's bleed-proof white and a splatter painting kind of technique in there. And you have a pretty, good textural statement as far as the end result. Two stamps used on here. If you have one kind of larger pine trees, in theory, this could be a one stamp scene, which is pretty fun to see what you can do as far as creating a scene with minimal, I guess, imagery, media, and techniques. Okay, hope you liked the scene. It's fun to do. Oh, I forgot about the pebbles, sorry. It's 2 pebbles, but they're very subtle. I already forgot what I used on these things sometimes. I'm doing it so fast. Okay, thanks again for watching, and thanks for, as always, for tuning into the Stampscapes channel.